This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So far. Fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for June 16th, 2020. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find our podcast on the Voices of Wrestling feed or on the dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on the RSS platform or application of your choice. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. I am one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Iron Mike Spears, and I'm joined as always by Case Lowe. Case, how's it going, bud?
Oh, Mike, what a loaded question in these times. I am doing fine. You know, I did a little nightly gardening. We started the show a little bit later than normal because I was too busy watering the plants in my backyard, lost track of time. I had to message Mike and say, I'll be a little bit later than expected. So again, I apologize for that. That's a very calming activity, though, which is, you know, not the state of Dragon Gate. Things are in turmoil. We don't exactly know what's coming next. But Mike, you asked me how I am doing lately. I'm doing all right. How are you doing, Mike?
You know, I'm getting through day by day. I like to hear that you're doing some planting, doing some gardening, because it is something that you would think that I would be able to do at the illustrious compound in the mountains, but I've not been able to do any growing or anything like that lately. I've been dealing with like just standard like growing old and dealing with shit you would never think that you'd be dealing with when you're a kid, such as air conditioner, like dealing with air conditioning people. Like that's what's been on my plate as of late. I know, like saying like air conditioner, like that's something that might seem like, oh, hoity-toity or like this, but like for where I am and where I live, like you kind of need to have air conditioning, or you just in the summer you're just covered by a hot wet blanket all the time. So having to deal with like air conditioning people, who I think are like some of the biggest con people in like this, it's such a rip. So I've just been frustrated with that, and it's just been a never-ending cycle for me.
I don't think, and if I need to check my privilege at the door, let me know. We are in an era where it's important to acknowledge and recognize our privileges, but I don't look at having an air conditioning as an elitist thing, Mike. I think you're okay saying publicly that you're having issues with your air conditioner and you don't want to deal with it because it sounds annoying, but you're in the smoldering heat of South Carolina. It's okay that you have an air conditioner. That is all right with me. Well, again, if I'm off base, have AB Aaron Bentley. He can slide into my DMs and educate me on my privilege, but I really think you're in the right here, Mike.
It's just one of those things that it's like, all right, so here is Mike Spears' big air conditioning thing that this is like super frustrating. So I moved out of an apartment into my own place 2 years ago, and I moved into the place, do with all the adult bullshit, and it's a pain in the neck. Anyone who has, you know, owned a place like knows, like, and you're buying for someone, it's a pain in your ass. And one of the things you're supposed to do is inspections, okay? So you make sure everything's on the level. If something's fixed, you go say, hey, I'm not going to deal with this. You need to fix this or I'm walking away. It's the negotiating thing. The person who owned this before I did used one of their friends as the inspector and did not tell me that the air conditioner was going to break. Within 2 weeks of me moving in 2018, everything broke to shit. I was like, oh, well, fuck. I got to deal with this. Got it all replaced. The first air conditioning people completely were running a scam on me. The second ones, I'm like, all right, let's get this handled. They seem to be on the up and up. Spent 2 months in some of the hottest summers in South Carolina at the time. They come in, I pay and get like it all taken up. Like it's like crazy what air conditioning technology is or what its price is. And then 2 years later, it all breaks down on me again. And I'm like, okay, y'all were running another scheme on me. Time for place number 3. And they come in and said, like, oh, this thing, did they not replace these when they put in your new thing? I was like, I thought they did. I was like, no, these are the original ones that are at least 15 years old. We would have tossed this in for free if you were putting the new system. And I'm like, you motherfuckers. So,
Mike, these are good things to know. As of earlier this week, I signed a lease to my first apartment ever. Yes, it's nothing like moving back to Chicago in a very happening area where nothing is happening. It is awesome timing. But this is good to know. I loathe the homeowners association. I can't believe people care about what their neighbors are doing. I'm sorry about your air conditioner. I'm sorry it didn't get fixed right the first or second time. I hope that this podcast can cool you off in a sense that you can get all of your piping hot takes out into the open, and maybe your internal system can cool off as a result.
Well, I have my own theory on HOAs, so we could say it for a different show. I believe we should all tear them down from the inside, as I'm planning
all
to
right,
do.
it's not that show. Save it for your Patreon.
So, when we talk about how things are hot and popping, Dragon Gate has really started to kind of gear up after King of Gate. We are looking in towards their summer schedule has started up. We've had 2 matches over last week, and we previewed on the last week's episode. We had 4 more matches come up ahead, and we decided to not just focus on what's happening in Dragon Gate Japan this episode. No. Because 2 of the wrestlers that are currently on excursion, Shun Skywalker and Yoshioki Oka, had a card a couple days ago that things happened and things might be changing for them on their excursion as well. So we're going to get into that as well. So, Case, we got 2 matches that happened in the auspices of Dragon Gate Japan, a 6-man match and then the All Japan Junior match. How'd you feel like? I feel like there was like a distinctly different vibe from these 2 matches than what we saw in King of Gate. What were your overall opinions of like as they're shifting gears right now?
Was the lighting in the building, was it different for these matches than it was for King of Gate?
Oh, they didn't have they did not use production lights.
I think it made the shows look better.
Yeah, it didn't look like you were like in this dark hall. It looked like you were
No,
in, like...
exactly. They used the house lights and it like brightened up the space, and it didn't look dingy. It looked nice.
Yeah, like that was something that I noticed, and it did seem like that they were using more cameras as well, because they usually stuck with a hard cam and one floor cam. It looked like they had one because we were getting shots on different sides that we were not getting before on these Lapis Hall shows.
That's a good point as well. As for the 2 matches, we had the 6-man on June 13th, Jason Lee Yuti and Oji Shiba against Yosuke Santa Maria, Kota Minoura, and Ho Ho Loon. And then the All Japan Junior Heavyweight title match on the 14th, which was originally Susumu Yokosuka defending against Hakuta Omori. And then on that night, Yosuke Santa Maria was added to the match. Big picture here, overall thoughts on these 2. I mean, I thought they were 2 fine matches. I think the high-end stuff from King of Gate was unequivocally better than these matches, but there was also stuff on King of Gate that was far worse than these. So I can't really complain. I mean, they're 1-match shows. I mean, it took me literally 20 minutes to watch these matches, and I didn't have to do any writing on it. So it was, just it was like a Dragon Gate snack, and I went about my day afterwards. But it was nice. I mean, the one thing that jumped out to me, and we talked last week about possible Kobe World happenings and the direction that I think they should go, which is the 9-man tag match, the trios 3-on-3-on-3 match, with the Toriyama, the Dragon Gate, and the RED units being represented there. Partially because, and I'm starting to discover this after watching so many King of Gate singles matches, and then the implementation of the bonus matches on those shows, and then watching the June 13th 6-man tag, I just think the multi-man matches work so much better in this environment than a singles match. And it's not meant as a slight to the wrestlers on the roster, but just, a chin lock is boring with people sometimes, and a chin lock in front of nobody is uncomfortable silence. But when you have these matches where guys can't stop moving, and there's constantly moves and dives, and there's guys running in and out of the ring, like in that 6-man tag match, I just think it works so much better in this environment. So, the triple threat match was fine. I liked it. I really came away enjoying the 6-man tag on the 13th. That was like, oh, that's Dragon Gate. That is what I have been missing.
And the thing about the 6-man tag, that was some of the most we've seen OG Shiba in a long time. And I think he, of course, he had like the bad knee issues that he lost about, I think it was like close to 18 months. It felt like, though, him coming back, like he's a member of the Bulk Club. He's definitely someone who's starting to gain mass. By the way, shout out to Benkei for crossing 115 kilos this week, and he's very proud of that. That's 253 pounds. Benkei's huge now, but
huge.
Just it's insane looking. But seeing OG was like such a kind of delight, and he really seems to be like, he got a lot of focus in this match. UT did not seem like that he really was just going to be like focusing and they were going to just like sprinkle him in there. I mean, this is pretty much like, you had a match against Ultimo, now you're back into the full thing. And then, it was a win for Maria. I thought that it was kind of interesting how they did like, oh, UT is not falling for Maria's shtick. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And this was just like a solid fun. This felt like what would be like an undercard Cork and tag match, and it was a good time.
Yeah, if this opened a Cork and Hall show, I mean, this would be getting, instead of the normal 3-star opener, this would be in the 3.25, even 3.5-star range if it opened up a show. It felt weird because it was the only thing that I had to watch from this, and it was,
right.
It was digestible, but it was like, okay, what else? Like, that's exactly it. It was an opening match, and then nothing followed it, which was strange. The finish with Maria going over and she pinned OG Shiba, I was surprised by that just for the fact that I thought this match existed to get UT a win after his loss to Ultimo. And, he got a lot of time. I thought he looked very good. He is looking healthy, which is good to see that it doesn't appear that he rushed back from this injury at all. He looks like he's in shape and he looks like he can still move around the ring in UT way. I was just surprised that he didn't get the win here.
Yeah, it did make sense, especially when you see what happened the next night with Maria getting into the title match. It made sense that Maria got the win here. But yeah, UT, it looks like that, especially for something like a collarbone, which from my knowledge of it is when you break your collarbone once, you have issues with your collarbone the rest of your life. Very similar to like your rotator cuff where it can pop in and out. It's just how those things operate. And UT looks solid. I mean, Minoura, he's there. Like, I didn't really have many takeaways for Kota Minoura, and like Ho Ho Loon. I mean, the guy is sticking around there in a pandemic, and he looks like it definitely seems like he does have some of a place in Dragon Gate in some fashion. And this was like a fun opening 6-man tag. I went 3 stars flat on this thing. I really like the junior, the All Japan World Junior match. What were your thoughts on that one?
So when the match was announced, when it was just Omori versus Yokosuka, I thought it was clearly set up to get the belt off of Yokosuka because, things are opening up. There are going to be more shows happening, but it's still a little uncertain as to who can do what and what the next step is. And I just assumed that All Japan was going to want the belt back in their possession now that they have the opportunity to run more shows. And, if that sounds insane because Omori is not, a credible challenger, I don't know. Again, I've been just completely disconnected from All Japan all year. But when the match was set up, I was like, oh, Omori's going to win this and take the belt back to All Japan. It'll be real simple. They added Maria to the mix, and I assumed that, oh, it's even more obvious. Omori is going to pin Maria and be done with it. But what I did not realize was it was an elimination match. And like Mike said, I mean, it's very good. We talked a few weeks ago, and I don't remember why we were talking about it. I don't even remember what show it was on. Maybe it was the Rewind and Rewatch Untouchable show where we were talking about triple threat matches in Dragon Gate and how there just aren't a lot of them.
Yeah.
And, this jumped out to me. I was like, oh, a triple threat match. This is kind of unique. And, it was a lot of one-on-one, guy gets hit, bounced out of the ring, another one-on-one encounter takes shape. But it wasn't a bad match by any means. Similar to the opener, or I'm sorry, not the opener, but the 6-man tag from the day before. It's in that 3.5-star range for me. It's something that was very good, but I didn't really ever consider it to be great.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, especially as someone who walked in, I will admit my ignorance about Hokuto Omori coming in here. I thought he stuck together with them running a fast-paced match, which, that could be a very difficult thing for people stepping into like the Dragon system to do so. I thought it was kind of funny that he was wearing the flags like how Yamato did, and he ripped them off for the match. I'm like, no, that's not how that's supposed to work. They're supposed to come off like sometime in the middle of the match.
Just randomly, for no reason. They're supposed to come off in the middle of the match.
Yeah, they're supposed to just fall. But like, I came away with like really being kind of impressed with Omori in this thing, and I think that this kind of makes him. I saw that he's only been in the business for a year, so I mean, like he's still like just fresh out of the being a rookie, and I feel like he equipped himself well. I did like that there was a whole bunch of Susumu just being like tired of the shit, just being too old for this. I'm like, all right, this is what we're going through. Okay, I guess this is something that we're gonna do, and it just ended up being like a solid like 15-minute match. Like, and it really did, like, talking about like three ways don't really happen much. This is a three-way that felt like could have been like before intermission or like the singles match on a Corkin show. And I came away with this going like, you know what? Okay. But I did definitely think that this was, when they initially booked it, I was like, all right, Susumu had the belt for a while. Now it's time to move it off someone. He won that tournament at the end of last year to become junior champion. Now it's time that they're going to want to put it back on their own, and Omori is an up-and-comer. It would have been a good time for that. So I thought it was kind of interesting.
I think under normal circumstances, we would be making a much bigger deal out of Susumu being the All Japan Junior Heavyweight Champion, and for a while, Mochizuki being the GHC Tag Team Champion with Naomichi Marufuji. But the Mochizuki stuff and then the Susumu stuff, I think they won the belts on the same week, the first week of January. And, then you had, Mochizuki and Marufuji defended here and Susumu defended there. And then everything got shut down, and Mochizuki and Marufuji eventually lost those belts. Susumu hangs on to it now in what just feels like an endless reign, not because the matches haven't been good, but just because it's just weird. It's a weird situation, and I think, like I said, under normal circumstances, we would make a much bigger deal out of Dragon Gate guys holding belts to not only other companies, but legitimate, respected companies in Japan. Not, this isn't Tokyo Garantai, this isn't a Nozawa offshoot, this is All Japan and no one. Dragon Gate's got guys holding belts here, but because everything has been so scattered all year, it's been more of an afterthought, which is strange.
Yeah, and it's probably why I remember when we had like that Diamante and Yoshida challenge at the JHC heavyweight titles, that was like, okay, they're getting their title match here. Like, that's a good thing for Dragon Gate that they're going to get a match and thing like this. And it just kind of like happened in the Arena Kobe Samba Hall show. And you're like, okay, well, that happened, and they dropped the belt. I thought this makes me think that just using that we could be seeing the end of Susumu's reign soon. And I mean, it's fine, and it's like different from like all the random titles that Kenichiro Arai brings around. So I mean, like, you're absolutely right about that.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Arai's always got a title for a promotion that doesn't make tape, that might not even run shows, but he is proudly the champion of whatever plastic belt he has.
Like Asuka Project Heat Up. Like, if there was a Tokyo-based indie for a while, he would be bringing their title. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's cool. You got a belt there. I've never heard of it, and it makes tape like once a year. So good for you.
Yeah,
Eric.
I'm not buying the Occupation of the Indies DVDs anytime soon, Arai. But I'll take your word that you won this belt and then proudly defended it.
Yeah, so it's something that like originally was supposed to be the Hikaru Sato title challenge was supposed to happen in Dragon Gate. So I know that like, Sato was the person that Susumu Yokosuka beat in Corkin on January 3rd. Like this is like, we think this title reign's gone forever. It's only been about a couple weeks, over 5 months long. It's just the state of the world right now that it's like that. So it'll be interesting to see that, and hopefully, I thought Omori looked solid. He equipped himself well, and if he was going to pop around with how things are in the wrestling world, if he appears in Dragon Gate, I'm not going to have any complaints with that.
Mike, what's going on with our friends in Mexico?
Okay, so I kind of sprung this on you. So, as listeners know, Shun Skywalker and Yuki Yoshioka are currently on an excursion in Mexico. To our knowledge, and talking to people in the company, I was told basically explicitly, count out Shun for 2020. Like, Shun's going to be in Mexico. And I was told, like, he's going to be there. Yuki Yoshioka, it felt like that he was going to be here for a little bit, but the majority of his tenure was going to be elsewhere that he's not able to get into. But so like Yuki Yoshioka, I think, has had 3 or 4 matches, I think, in Mexico where Shun had more consistent work, but with the shutdown, especially with how it's affecting Mexico, that's not been the case. However, IWRG out of Reina Nacopon and outside of Mexico City, I believe. I think that's where Nacopon is, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But this is like the traditional partner of the Dragon system. Like Ultimo Dragon Gym was based right in Nacopon, and I don't think it was based in the arena, but I know it was based there. And this is where everyone would go. This was a home company for the millennials when they were there. This is like, if you go search like people like Dragon Kid or Little Dragon, you'll see that he popped up there. And the same for like Don Fuji, Shima, like all of them would be there.
There's an extended Crazy Max run that happened in IWRG.
Yeah, it's a big place. But they had a show that made TV that was an empty arena show that both Yoshioka and Shun Skywalker were on. And we've been meaning to try to do some coverage of this, but it's kind of fit in that this was kind of the perfect time and it was relevant to do here. So, Case, how much IWRG do you normally watch?
Well, you say you sprung it on me, which, I mean, I was going to watch this match, these matches, even if we didn't talk about them on the pod. To say I watch IWRG consistently would be an outright lie, but I've always got an eye on the promotion.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no, please, it's okay. You and your air conditioner, I get it. You're all hotty-toddy. It's whatever. I'm used to it by now, 3 years of doing the show with you or whatever, but I've always got an eye on IWRG. I at least know what's happening there. But to say I watch IWRG is a different story, and after watching parts of the show, I don't think I'm sticking around once Yoshioka and Skywalker leave. I think it will go to the, Cubs fan posted IWRG results. Let me look to see if I recognize the names. Okay, I do. Okay, exit tab, move on with my life.
That's fair. And there were a lot of names on these shows. So Yoshioka had a singles match against Puma del Oro and Shun Skywalker. They did this Rey del Ring thing, and it's usually like a giant battle royal, but this year, because of how it is, they split into two. Originally, it was supposed to be a single elimination tournament, which that would have been a lot of matches for them to have to go through. But instead, this is supposed to be half of it, which it might end up being the only part of it due to reasons we'll talk to you about later, where Shun Skywalker won, and the last person he eliminated was Dragon Bane. And I have to say, Yuki Yoshioka in Mexico was not something that I was like, I think I've said, I don't know if this is going to be a great fit here. I ended up really enjoying and had a good time with his match. Like, he was doing some crazy things, and Puma del Oro was taking it to him, and I ended up having a good time with this.
Yeah, the matches that the Dragon Gate guys were involved in were fun in kind of weird ways. I mean, Yoshioka, I think, works in IWRG, and I think would work if, things opened up and he went to the Crash or he went to DTU. Like, I think he could find comfort, maybe not a home, but I think he could find comfort in some of these lucha promotions. I am still haunted at the idea of what could have been of Yoshioka maybe rolling into MLW this year and grappling with Tom Lawler. I had a ton of interest in stuff like that, but it just doesn't look like that is feasible now. So the Yoshioka match, I mean, he's grown out his hair.
His hair is wild. He needs a haircut.
Maybe he had some facial hair going on. I don't entirely remember, but he looked older. There was some gruff and some grit to Yoshioka that was not there in Japan. And then, he had a match with Puma de Oro, who is very young, but was very entertaining. And this, for a lucha singles match, which is just an admittedly even the highest possible bar of a lucha singles match for me as a low bar. I mean, things cap out at about 3.5 stars for me. And those are the matches that people are like, this is a match of the year contender. So I've got my issues with some of the lucha stuff that unfortunately Yoshioka fell into, but I thought this was a very fun match. I mean, I'm glad it aired. I'm glad there's signs of life for Yoshioka and Skywalker, because I've asked around to people that are able to get in touch with them, have you heard from Yoshioka and Skywalker? And the answer has been no, which is scary, quite honestly.
Distressing.
Yes.
I will say, it does not look like that they've been working out as much. That was noticeable.
I thought Yoshioka looked okay, but when Shun Skywalker came out, my first thought was, oh my God, Skywalker got big. I don't blame him. I don't want him going to the gym in Mexico if they're open, but yeah, Skywalker looked a little bit bigger, which maybe he's, gearing himself up for the upcoming Dragon Gate Open, the Hoss Gate tournament that I don't know about. But yeah, he had some weight to him that looked a little different than the way the dojo guys have been bulking up.
100 kilos live. Maybe that's
Yeah.
what we can call it. Yeah, it's something that like the Yuki Yoshioka match there,
Like that one took me a second, but I liked that. Just it took a second to register, but that was very funny.
it was a thinker. It was a
Yes,
thinker.
exactly.
I think the interesting thing about like Yoshioka match was it was a double count out, which that happens all the time. But it just was something that like there was some grappling in it. It was a pretty like solid one. And when Yoshioka went in control, it seems that like he understood, like because sometimes when you like insert these people on excursions and you put them in places where you don't think they're going to thrive, they flounder, and it just seems like an awkward fit. He got like, okay, this is a singles match with this guy that I will feign ignorance about Puma Del Oro. Don't know much about him. But the two of them were like, okay, we're going to kind of do like a match that would work here. And they had a bunch of like fun topes. So it did get a little bit long towards the end. But then the tope that led to the double count out finish, I mean, Puma Del Oro pulled a Davey Richards and went right over the barrier into the crowd. And it was very believable. And it was a fun time. And then when Shun was in, like the Battle Royal basically got to a point where until it was like Shun and Dragonbane, which that's a notorious name for different reasons, until those two got into it and it was between those two, it was kind of a little bit of a mess, but they ended up having like a pretty solid like final thing. It was pinfall and submission only for it, and Shun won with a really sick power bomb that was really brutal looking, so that was pretty cool. And it just ended up being like, it was nice to check in on the former Mochizuki Dojo guys and seeing how they were doing in Mexico.
I'm glad you mentioned the Davey Richards dive in the Yoshioka match. I skipped over that in my notes. An insane amount of effort to put into a no-fan show. I will never understand why people would do that in front of a packed crowd, let alone literally no one else, but more power to him. And then, Mike, do we want to get into why Shun Skywalker pinning Dragon Bane was at least kind of noteworthy?
Okay, yeah, we can. Because
I don't think we ever talked about that on the show.
No, we didn't. So earlier this year, Strong Hearts, of course, were in North America. They did some shows and for AEW and a bunch of indies. They also, because Shima has this relationship with IWRG, he's close with the people there, and they came in, and it was just him and T-Hawk for this match versus Dragonbane and his brother. And I'm blanking on his brother's name right now. I apologize. I'm going to look at this right there. And it broke down into a total complete mess into a shoot. And it turned out that it was very close. Like, people were talking about this match between Shima and T-Hawk there. And to the extent that I think it was like remarking with people, okay, so it was Shima and T-Hawk versus Dragonbane and, I don't know, I blanked on his name, El Hijo de Canis Lupus. And then there was a third team of Puma King and Septimo Dragon where Shima was taking it off. Shima wanted to go and have a good time and grapple a little bit, but Dragonbane and Canis de Lupus just were not having it, and it broke down in a pretty ugly fashion. And there was like a backstage promo, which, talking to people, they were like, that's the most aggression I've ever seen out of T-Hawk in our lives. And it was a mess. And then Dragonbane and Canis Lupus went over to Noah for their junior tour that they had there, and then lo and behold, Shun Skywalker was in IWRG soon after that and had a match with Dragonbane where it did not seem like these two were not on the same page and were not offending each other versus how things were at the Strong Hearts guys. Do you think I covered that fairly as possible?
I think so. It was the January 26th IWRG show, and like Mike said, it was Shima and T-Hawk against Dragonbane and El Hijo de Canis Lupus and Puma King and Septimo Dragon, who I'm actually a big fan of, a luchador that I have a lot of stock in, and I've always wanted him to do a Dragon Gate tour. It's never happened,
right.
But for many reasons, a fun match that you should go back and watch if you haven't seen it.
It is a match that happened, and it's a match that breaks down, and if you're someone that likes seeing how things break down, definitely go out of your way to watch it. If you also want to see a lot of spit and a lot of hitting people really hard, and at a certain point, you could tell that I felt bad for Puma King and Septimo Dragon because they were just there wanting to have a good match. It just
they were not affiliated in this. They were
whatsoever
innocent bystanders in the massacre that occurred.
Yeah, but I thought that Shun and Dragonbane had a fun stretch there at the end, and they did like mic promos after that, like how you standardly do in lucha. But there's another big thing that happened about the showcase. I don't know how up you are about what happened with IWRG after this.
No, I'm unfamiliar with what's going on now.
Okay, so Mexico And for people who aren't familiar, Lucha Libre operates on commissions, where like each state or each area usually will have like a commission that's like attached to the government in some aspects, but in a lot of ways it's kind of like wrestling union, and they license the wrestlers. It's actually not dissimilar to how some states still run in the United States. This show apparently was not supposed to happen, and that's like the big thing about like shows in Mexico is that, especially around district, the state of Mexico, Mexico State, District Federal, they've been shutting down basically everything. And like when AAA did their tournament, they had the Lucha Fire tournament. They filmed it, they taped it all before airing it because they were trying not to get the commission mad at them. This show was not supposed to happen, and they pulled the license for Arena Nakapon. And they're threatening to remove all the wrestlers that were involved in it, their wrestling license to do as well, which is a big thing in Mexico. Is the majority of wrestling, especially like wrestling people keep tabs on, other than like if you live in Laguna, you follow Laguna. If you live in Baja, you follow Baja, so forth and so on. Happens around Estado de Mexico. So Shun and Yuki Yoshioka might be in a little bit of an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, I would hate to see their license get revoked, and then, I don't know, they would have to fly back to Japan and join this very heated Dragon Gate story that's occurring. I mean, that would just be a travesty if that happened.
Well, I mean, I feel for these guys because...
yes, I do too.
This is obviously like, especially with someone like Yuki Yoshioka, it seemed like that it's like, hey, we want you to go travel in this with Shun. There are big things I would feel like would be in the plans for Shun, but like they're trying to get out of everyone's minds for a little bit. Like that's part of the reason why Dragon Gate does this. This isn't an Akira Tozawa situation where it's like, well, let's see what happens if you go on an excursion. These are guys that they have plans for, and you know, getting an opportunity for them to do this, to pick up styles, and also scout out other people maybe to bring back to Dragon Gate has been unfairly and unjustly kind of cut because of COVID. And hopefully there's not going to be a big problem with them. Hopefully this all works out, and when things start opening up, Yuki Yoshioka is able to do his movements as we anticipated, and Shun's able to get on more things. But it seems like that our poor Mochizuki Dojo kids are in a little bit of a pickle right now, as are everyone else on that show.
Mike, we've got some more Dragon Gate action coming up this weekend. Do you want me to read down these cards real quick?
Yeah, let's go through it.
All right, on June 20th, which is this Saturday, we have two matches. We have Naruki Doi and Dragon Kid against Eita and Diamante, and Dragon Dia versus Big R Shimizu in a singles match. And then on the 21st, Ben K and Kenta Kabune team up to take on Takashi Yoshida and Yo. And also the Open the Brave Gate Championship match, a feud that has been tearing apart Dragon Gate all year. Kaito Ishida defends against Keisuke Okuda. Mike, what jumps out to you from these four matches?
Well, I mean, it's the Brave Gate match, right? Like that's
the
kind of sneaky way they presented is kind of like hiding this match in the middle of this when this has been the hottest feud in the company this year. Like, this is something that you would think they would have been holding off for whatever kind of Kobe World was going to happen, and they're doing it, or they've done it in Lapis Hall, which is nuts. And then they're obviously pairing up Naruki Doi and Eita as the Dream program. Like, it does seem like that they're going to focus back on that. And then Dia versus Shimizu. There's a little bit in like each of these matches that interests me, Case. Like I have to say this, they could just be throwing matches out there and having more of like the cork and openers, but no, these are all matches that either are building off of stuff that happened in the tournament, people who are trying to move up in Kabuna and Hyo, or the biggest feud or the current hottest feud in the company being paid off in front of no fans.
Yes, I completely agree with you that there's something interesting in all of these matches. I think the tag match on the 20th, Doi and Dragon Kid versus Eita and Diamante, unfortunately disproves any sort of hopes I had for the multi-man Kobe World main event. I think on the 21st, you have Ishida versus Okuda here, which I think is notable as we move towards Kobe World. But before we get to that, I just have to say the Benkei Kenta Kabune team sounds so exciting, and they could have not booked them against less exciting opponents in Yoshida and Yo. What a disappointment for that team that looks young and full of energy. And nothing against their opponents, but guys, we can book a more exciting match than this. I mean, come on now. But I do want to say on Ishida versus Okuda and Kobe World as a whole, we should know, hopefully, if not next week, then the week after, kind of what the plan is. I've been reaching out to everybody that I can talk to try to get as much information as I can about the plan. This is by no means confirmed. I've heard conflicting reports, but there is an idea that maybe Kobe World is moved to August this year, and they run it in World Hall where World always is, but they do it a month later, which in return gives them a chance to do an August Cork and Hall show as one final build. And I think Ishida versus Okuda being on that 21st show, it sticks out to me as being a little bit suspicious, because had you asked me, right now to fantasy book a Kobe World card, given the booking that we've had since everything shut down in March, Ishida versus Okuda would have been the second match I would have put on the show after Doi versus Eita. So I find it interesting that they're doing that here, maybe trying to blow off that feud and get a fresh angle going if they are indeed trying to sell tickets even at a limited capacity to Kobe World Hall. I don't know what the plan is, but I think we're going to find out soon enough and end the speculation that we've been doing for the past few weeks. But Ishida versus Okuda being on these cards and not on a bigger show, just very strange to me. I can't shake the thought that maybe World is moving back and they're instead going to book a new angle around Kaito Ishida.
So, with this happening here, and with the speculation that we are looking at an August Kobe World at Kinnan Hall, which would allow them to have a Korakuen and probably have a KBS Hall, a Kyoto KBS, a Osaka show maybe, a Hakata, and a show in front of a crowd in Kobe, maybe if they're going to still do Lapis or Sambo Hall. That's not a whole lot of time to build up another challenger here. Do you think that this maybe could be an indecisive match? They then use that as a further build and then finally have the big blow off at Kobe World? Or do you think Ishida's retaining here?
I think that's very possible, but I will differ from that logic only because we have that Dragon Dia versus Big R Shimizu match. I think maybe Ishida goes over clean on the 21st, Dia beats Shimizu, and we get some sort of Dia versus Ishida program as we head into World, because I think under normal circumstances, that seemed likely. Well, I guess no, because Dia is the Triangle Gate champion. I keep on forgetting that because the last show we had in front of fans.
You forgot about Ben.
Yeah, was the Ben K Dia Triangle Gate team that ended up winning. And then they've had no matches as a trio since. We haven't really seen them with the belts. So I continue to forget that our Triangle Gate champions are Ben K, Strong Machine J, and Dragon Dia currently. So, you know what? I mean, they did the non-finish at King of Gate. Knowing Dragon Gate, they can extend things and they can really hammer the point home. So I take back the last 60 seconds of words that have been said. I think they do a non-finish here, and I think they have a definitive conclusion at Kobe World.
I mean, that's just what I'm guessing. Just because that's such a short period of time. I mean, you could always have someone step up and do a challenger. I guess you could probably say maybe DK can make a challenge against Ishida. Like that's
that's the thing, because if you're going to book more shows between this upcoming weekend, and then let's say they move World back to August, and even if you just get a Korakuen out of that with limited capacity,
right?
All it takes is one tag match of Ishida and Yoshida versus whoever else. Pick your guys on the roster, Jason Lee and Maria, and Jason Lee pins Ishida and says, okay, I want the match at World. I mean, it's a Brave Gate match. It's not going to be selling tickets, so there's not a ton of build-up necessary. It's just a matter of who they decide to go with for that coveted spot at World.
Yeah. And then Dia versus Shimizu. I mean, we have his losing streak / the fact that Eita's not impressed with like his one pinfall that he had during King of Gate. You could say Shimizu wins this and then goes into having a Triangle Gate challenge, and the same thing could happen if somehow Takashi Yoshida pins Benkei, I guess.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I think we just figured this out. I think Shimizu is going to beat Dia, and then Yoshida and Yo are going to beat Benkei and Kabune.
Yeah, because Kabune is there.
And that's going to be our Triangle Gate match. Is we're going to get Yoshida, Yo, Shimizu against Benkei, Strong Machine J, Dragon Dia. That is two suspect there's too many dots to be connected to not have any of them connect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, especially since we're starting to believe that there is still going to be a ticketed Kobe World in the future. It's an interesting weekend of shows. Like, I'm glad that they're kind of sticking to like what some sort of schedule here, you know? So I think that's kind of a cool thing to see what's going to happen. I'm pretty excited about these 4 shows. So have I convinced you to think that it's going to be a no contest between Ishida and Okuda?
I think that's likely.
Any other big thoughts about this before we start wrapping this up with one last thing?
No, I think that's all I've got on the Dragon Gate side of things.
Yeah, just because of how we've been doing Open the Voice Gate lately, and especially with Rewind and Rewatch, I would talk about it on Rewind and Watch, since this is more caters to DGUSA, but because of how we record things, this would not be going out there for a couple of weeks, so we think it would be appropriate now to talk about this, especially given the rumors in the news, and there was stuff that was brought out even today about the situation. It does seem that in some sort of fashion or way that we might be seeing the end of WWN, which of course was the family promotions put on by Gabe Sapolsky and Sal Hamawi, but more important for our interests, Dragon Gate USA. And it does seem that it might be that the WWN library goes to WWE, which is insane to think about. But I just wanted to kind of touch on that note before we go. I know, Case, you've talked before about trying to put something together, or more about Evolve, but just wanted to get your thoughts about this, because we really haven't talked too much about this.
Yeah, keep on looking at voicesofwrestling.com. I will eventually have some sort of Evolve retrospective piece that will be published. I'm working on it now, but admittedly, I don't know how long it's going to take. I just know that at some point it'll get done. Logistically, the idea of the WWN library being owned by WWE is scary to me. And I understand the convenience of, well, what if the Dragon Gate USA shows pop up on the network? I mean, that'd be great for our podcast. I mean, if more people were able to watch these Dragon Gate USA shows, it's just, a power thing that I don't like about, formative Akira Tozawa matches and hyped Yamato and Shingo performances and Shima. I don't like the fact that the library could end up in the hands of people. I mean, WWN doesn't know what they're doing with it. They have a horrible digital marketing plan, but WWE doesn't know what they have. They know they have clips for Johnny Gargano documentaries and, Malcolm Bivens promos that they can use for, more stuff, whatever. More power to them. I mean, that's not wrong that they want to use those assets in that way, but losing the Dragon Gate USA archive into people that just, know nothing about the promotion, it admittedly scares me a little bit. And then as for Evolve as the promotion, it's a promotion that at points I really, really loved. I mean, I watched a lot of Evolve shows in 2014 and 2015 that, quite honestly, not a lot of people have seen. I mean, I remember the online discourse for the Evolve pay-per-views of a show like Evolve 38, which I was just looking at for what I'm writing. I know a lot of people haven't seen Evolve 38, but it's a really, really good show. I can assure you that. And it's a promotion that, 2014, 2015, 2016, I really, really loved it. And I was excited when, after all of the bad publicity they've gotten, after all of the public meltdowns on the Twitter of Gabe Sapolsky and on the public persona of Gabe Sapolsky, I was really happy that in 2016, the promotion finally found its stride and found its purpose in professional wrestling. And then from there, they use that leverage. They get into this Flow Slam deal. And, I didn't think Flow Slam was going to change the lives of professional wrestlers forever, but I was really excited at the prospect of Flow Slam and what it could mean. And, this readily accessible archive that never ended up happening on the Flow Slam side. I mean, they never had the full Dragon Gate USA library up there. At least I do not think. And if they did, it was in the last few months of the site's existence. But
they did, but it was something.
They did.
This is something they threw up after all the bullshit happened, and when they still had the library, and it was all up for free. Okay, it was one of those things.
That's right. And then after Flow Slam, and I stuck with the promotion up until, Walter showed up and wrestled Adam, or I'm sorry, Adam Cole showed up and wrestled Walter, and then you had the Velveteen Dream appearance. And then once it became the pipeline to NXT, I always kept an eye on the promotion, and no matter what the next move is, I think if Gabe Sapolsky is booking it, I think it's important to pay attention to it because, Gabe has made a lot of these stars of the past 20 years of professional wrestling, and I think if you know this podcast, you're aware of that. But Gabe is someone who frustrates me. We talk about on the Dragon Gate USA show. We make fun of him on the Dragon Gate USA show. He's just a frustrating human, and I don't know him personally, but his public persona is just agitating at times. But he's really important to the landscape of professional wrestling, and ultimately I do think he gets too much shit, even if a lot of it is deserved. So when they went full WWE Evolve, I lost interest in it, but I couldn't completely ignore it because it was a Gabe product, and I at least knew the cards and knew what was happening. And the fact that they are going out with a whimper, the fact that it seems like it was COVID related, but also it was trending in this direction anyways, it's really unfortunate. I mean, the promotion lasted for 10 years, which certainly not every promoter can say, but I hate to see them end like this, even if I wasn't in love with the direction they were going and I wasn't in love with the final product. It is a real shame that the promotion is ending on the note that it is.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm someone that I have had my own interactions with Gabe that were not pleasant several times. And it does seem that he was an incredibly difficult person to work with, but I kind of came to a conclusion about my opinion of Gabe Sapolsky, which is always kind of molding, and especially as we do the series, when we were talking about Ricochet's ascent in Dragon Gate USA, that it was all worth it. All the bullshit was worth it because they made the wrestling mark to share a trade. They did all the investment, and they got back Ricochet. They had Swan. They had Uha Nation / Apollo Crews. They were able to do that, and they were able to see and pretty much have a home for, in some ways, for Akira Tozawa during his ascent. And in that way it is. To my knowledge, in case you're absolutely might know more about this, Dragon Gate doesn't have any claims on this footage. Like, this is Gabe's footage. Like, DGUSA stuff, like, that's never been a huge thing to have that footage available for the native fans. It just was kind of its own thing. So I don't think that we're going to hear about, like, Dragon Gate, like, trying to claim ownership of the archive in any sort of way. Am I right about that?
No, I to my knowledge, you're correct, and it's a shame because, just for the sake of Dragon Gate Live, the network, it would be so great if all the DGUSA shows were up there. I mean, it would be awesome, but to my knowledge, and again, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, Dragon Gate doesn't have any rights to the DGUSA footage, and unfortunately, they don't have any rights to the DGUK footage either.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's just one of those things that I think that this was a long time coming in a lot of ways, and this was always kind of the thing that when you get in bed with snakes, don't be surprised when you wake up bitten. So, like, this was going to happen.
I will say this. Like, again, I followed the promotion consistently from the summer of 2013 onwards, and even then, well, I don't entirely know. I just know that you could tell what Gabe's level of interest was in what he was doing. And there were times in 2014 and especially 2015 and especially 2016 where Gabe would put out cards that you could tell he was proud of and he was excited about. And I think just, the constant bullshit of the industry, and I think Flow Slam especially, it just seemed like that took a lot out of him, of like, this was his opportunity to really make some money, booking Evolve, doing what he does, using lasers, doing that sort of thing. And when that didn't work out, again, like, the promotion for the next year, it's Walter and Keith Lee and Joey Janela, Matt Riddle's still there. Like, there's exciting stuff going on. Darby, Zack Sabre Jr. still there, but it felt like he had detached himself from there, and it's been a slow descent into whatever this is, and I think it was bound to happen eventually. I just think that COVID ultimately expedited the final destination of Evolve, which is unfortunate because For whatever reason, it doesn't have the legacy of 2004, 2005, 2006 Ring of Honor. It's not prestigious in the way that IWA Mid-South footage has even become. Like, I don't know 10 years from now, the people that are my age 10 years from now that are, on whatever networking tool there is and are discussing wrestling at an intelligent level, I don't know if they're picking up an Evolve 5 or an Evolve 20 anytime soon and digging through those shows. And I don't know what to make of that legacy. The more and the more I think about Evolve, the more confusing it is, because it really felt in the 10-year span, there's about 7 distinct different eras of the promotion. And I don't know of any other company that in a decade span changed and flipped as much as they did. And it's just a very confusing history to look back on.
Yeah, and I guess that's like one of the big things I'm taking away from it is that this was a thing that you can even kind of tell a little bit with DGUSA as well. That his interest was ebbed and flowed, and I think at a certain point, the big thing was the grind for Gabe Sapolsky. Like, especially like when he's had his public spats, he always kind of goes back to, the grinding like this. I mean, this was a guy who basically fresh out of college was doing stuff for ECW, then going to Ring of Honor, then barely taking any time off, then launching DGUSA and then later Evolve. It just seems like this is a guy that at a certain point, and you can also tell it through his booking, he just seemed done. And maybe it is that him doing stuff at NXT gives him that creative passion that completely lost him at times. And, my big concern here, and it has always been, the fact that with all that stuff with FlowSlam, and I've seen the numbers, guys, like the numbers for like FlowSlam and all of that, and no one really ever talked about like, wrestler pay went up at all for that. And that is something that at least me, and not to get super political there, that I think that's a huge injustice, but at the same time, understanding that this was like one of the things we've been learning about in DGUSA, and I make sure to keep track of it throughout the Raymond Wetch process is, Case, he basically was running promotions that were struggling to even break even for close to 10 years. So this was
20 years, because it's not like Ring of Honor.
Right.
He was ever cashing in. I mean, it was 20 years of keeping his head above water and treading lightly. It's not an easy task. That is ultimately why I think Gabe takes too much shit. Is that job? I mean, it's one that intrigues me. It's one that, sure, throw my name in a hat. I'd love to book a wrestling company, but the intensity and the passion that Gabe has for it is not an enviable position. And so, like, in terms of like pay and stuff, if he gets a big, surplus of cash from FlowSlam but he doesn't distribute it to the wrestlers, that's bullshit. There's also a part of me that just, take away the FlowSlam money from the equation. If I was a wrestler, I would be taking less money to work for Gabe, because I know what that means for my career. And that is something that, Gabe probably poorly balanced. He probably took advantage of too many guys, didn't pay them enough. But again, he was this at times almost underappreciated power player in the wrestling industry. But he really had a lot of control and a lot of say over what was going on. And Evolve, Evolve lasted longer than his time in Ring of Honor did. And it's just very strange to look back at this promotion and to see the ebbs and flows, the names that came through, some of the names that stuck, some of the big names that just didn't work out. I was looking at a card that had Dominic Dijak on the undercard of an Evolve show, which I didn't remember. Then when I went to my only Evolve show in 2017, I saw a Dijak there. Dijak versus Keith Lee almost wiped out friend of the show Joey Bay on a big dive. That was fun. That was a fun show. But yeah, I think that's all I've got on Evolve. I didn't expect to talk about it this much, but it's just a strange promotion that I hope 10 years from now is still being discussed as something that mattered in the professional wrestling industry to some extent.
Yeah, and I think like the one big takeaway from all of this, and basically from 2002 to 2010 was, and this is kind of like the wrestler pay thing, that's something that I just will hold against. Like, that's incontrovertible to me. But for certain things and for certain eras, it wasn't necessarily like, I don't believe that he was this god booker. And I feel like we're experiencing that through a DGUSA rewatch, that he has certain flaws that he never really figured out post Ring of Honor, and I think carried through his remainder of his time in Evolve, especially in how to end a push and how to do certain things. But he understood the landscape in a certain way, and it got to a point that I think that Orlando Mania weekend, that Flow Slam weekend, when you had both the WWN experience, wherever he calls it, and then you had the first Joey Janela spring break, really was the change, because it did very much see that he had his way of doing things. He had his things with especially the WWE people. But then you had this other opportunity that kind of supplanted that. And we've seen kind of how Brett Lauderdale and Joey Janela were able to launch something out of that. And I find that very interesting that event happened, especially since that was something that happened under the auspices of Flow Slam. So I think
I will say this to round out the show. I am someone that constantly complains about old people in professional wrestling, because you have to remember, I was born in 1999. I was born in the height of the Attitude Era, and I am now 21 years old. I can vote, I can drink, I can kind of do whatever I want. Most 21-year-olds do not know what the Attitude Era was. Stone Cold Steve Austin is not really a star to people my age. The Rock is, but most people my age don't know that The Rock was a wrestler. This has a point, I promise. So I'm constantly complaining about the older voices in wrestling, the refusal to change, the fact that some combination of McMahon, Jarrett, Bischoff, Russo, Cornette have had their say in pro wrestling for really 40 years now. But your point about Lauderdale and Joey Janela Spring Break is exactly right. Gabe Sapolsky has been booking professional wrestling for 20 years. I like Gabe. I think he is a flawed booker, but ultimately a good booker. But we have seen what he can do. We know Gabe's ideas. And I think that is a crucial part of the Evolve journey is, from Ring of Honor's inception in 2002 through that WrestleMania weekend 2017, we saw Gabe Sapolsky's vision for independent wrestling, and I think that infiltrated throughout the entire indie system. And Gabe's thought process ultimately ruled the land. And then we saw a newer, fresher, more innovative mind take control. And Gabe was never able to adapt and recover from that.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of way to look at that, especially going towards the future. And hey, if somehow things change and Dragon Gate is able to do things more in the United States, call it Brett Lauderdale. I think that'd be pretty interesting.
Yes, I would like to see that.
I'm just going to throw a match out here that I think would be absolutely insane. Shane Mercer versus Yuki Yoshioka. That is a match I would be really interested in seeing if that could happen.
That is a match, I will say that.
that it is. But okay, so I think that's going to do it for this week. We'll be back with you next week talking about, of course, those four big matches that they're having in Kobe Lapis Hall, and as we have a build to a Kobe World. When it is and where it is, we don't know, but we are now fully on the road to Kobe World. Okay, is there anything you wanted to hit on and plug before we get out of here?
No, you know where to find me. Have a good one.
Yep, we'll catch you next time and open the voice gate. Take care.